And looks like we're going. I guess I could kind of start off, and then we'll just feed off of each other. The first area says to define and describe the educational theory and what practices it suggests for effective teaching. We chose the social learning theory. I dove pretty deeply into this, and Albert, I think it's Bandura, into the experiments and things that he contributed to the psychology community. Most of it stemmed from his 1977 book, also called Social Learning Theory. And basically, after reading through all of the required articles, and then I branched off of there into various other articles and some experiments that he did, he's basically saying that he agrees with behavioralists and their learning theories, but there are certain sections that aren't covered with their theories. Some of the learning behaviors don't fit into those other theories, basically, is what he's saying. And the theory that he has covers those. His theory basically is saying that individuals can learn information or behaviors by observing others perform those actions or behaviors. That's pretty much the theory in a nutshell. Some of the main concepts include people can learn through observation. He also goes on to say internal mental states are an essential part of this process. And what I found interesting was he also says just because something has been learned doesn't mean that it will result in a behavior change. So we can kind of dive deeper into that later on. As far as describing the theory, is there anything you wanted to add to that, or something that you might?
Yeah, I basically said the same thing. Like, it's about observing others, and like, one thing I thought of is that, like, if a student sees a behavior being rewarded, sometimes if they're more apt to like repeat it. And basically it's like seeing the consequences also is kind of important on that. And then the learning is influenced by like a person's self efficiency. So like I kind of like dove into self efficiency a little bit. So like it's kind of like the person's judgment on whether they will be successful at it or not. So like kind of like inside they have like verbal persuasion, and then logical vertification, and then like observation of watching others, and then past accomplishments. And then if you take all four of those together, they will help the person feel like they can do it. So like just like hearing things, like persuasion, like people around them talking, and then like as a teacher, just like words of encouragement is very helpful. And then like with tasks, like the relationship between a new task and one that's like already mastered, like they've been successful in like other tasks that are similar, or like they've done something in the past where they were like successful, like logically, if they can do that, then they can do this next thing, and then modeling someone like already mastered the task. And so they see the person do it, and so then they can eventually like be motivated to be successful to do it. And then just like, the teachers can like really like kind of reward and like say like, hey, you accomplished this. And so like all those together can help with self-efficiency and like making them feel like they can do it. But yeah, like I feel like that all helps, but like basically the whole learning theory starts out with like observing peers and like being influenced by peers. And like I remember reading a little bit at the beginning, and it said something like, oh well, this is really a helpful theory for kids who kind of like act up, or they like are the ones that like kind of want to act out and like not pay attention. So like this theory is like they'll be more motivated by the people around them than they are like a teacher, you know. So that was another thing I thought about.
Yeah, and the example they gave on that was, which I'm sure most all of us, especially art teachers, have a handful of those students that are a little difficult, that do act out, and it's usually reoccurring students. But what they're saying is, like you said, if they see another student being rewarded for good behavior, it might influence them to do the same. So the example they gave was it might influence them if they see a student who is following instructions and behaving well ask for a treat kindly and receive one, then that might influence them to act in the same manner. Another example that they gave was if a student that often acts out or doesn't have great behavior in a class sees another student who is always early to class be rewarded, then that might influence them to come early each day. It's all, the whole theory is based on observations. And the next part says, how do you envision this theory guiding you in planning your instruction and or assessment? Reading through these articles and the other learning theories that we read about, I unknowingly use this strategy to teach by default. I didn't even know that I was using it, but I think that I use it because when I was the student, the teachers that used strategies like this, that modeled and physically showed you exactly what you need to know or do and show you how to do it, that's how I learned the best when I was in school. And that's the strategies that I always remember sticking. The information really was absorbed when they
have to like figure out how they can retain the information, or like even like want to retain it, you know, like
yeah,
like what motivates them. And like sometimes just like a teacher demonstrating something just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yep. And throughout the last 2 years, through these college courses, I've tried different strategies. Some of them have worked well, some of them failed completely. But I've always found that with me modeling kind of what they're supposed to be doing, each step of the project, each part of the lesson, me showing them how and what to do and their options, that always gets the information to them the best, in my experience anyway. So I really like this learning theory, and I agree with most of its beliefs.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I've kind of like fell into it by accident. Like, for example, I was teaching 5th grade and 4th grade some weaving techniques, and they were a little bit complicated. So I would do a demonstration for sure on how to do it, but then some of the kids would pick up on it, and then of course some of the kids wouldn't. And so what was happening kind of by accident is they were kind of learning off of each other by observing each other. And then the ones that finished fast, they like actually wanted to teach the other kids how to do it. And so that became like for me, I was very thankful for that because I couldn't help everybody, and it was very like, you know, the kids that needed help, they really needed help. So sometimes I feel like it just kind of naturally happens in the classroom, whereas especially with art projects, because they can just like visually see it, what everybody else is doing. And so that kind of like either motivates them or, like they're like want to like complete it because they see somebody else complete it. And so they're like, ooh, and then if it was like a weaving project, we were doing like bracelets. And so they really wanted to like have the end product, even though like it was kind of complicated to do. It was like you had to weave them between these 4 straws, and then you had to take them off the straws, and then that part made it into the bracelet. So like, yeah, it was hard to get there, but they all wanted the end product really badly. So just like motivation's a big part of it, especially art.
Yeah, and it must be that kind of project, because I had the exact same reaction when we learned weaving last year. I had students that picked up on it right away. Some students had maybe done it at home. And yeah, the ones that finished early or knew it, they wanted to immediately go and help those that weren't exactly getting it. And they wanted to teach it. So it must be something about that process or that specific project, because yeah, I had the exact same reaction with my students. It's pretty cool to see. Number 3, share and discuss success stories. We've kind of done that. That you have related to this theory or the practices it suggests in your own classroom.
I think for me, it's like sometimes just like, okay, so the kids finish an art project, and sometimes we have them show like a piece of art in front of the class, and then we discuss it. So it's kind of like a critique. I don't think they call it that in elementary school, but so like the kids will like look at each other's work, and then that becomes kind of like they're visually seeing people's work and then talking about it. And so like I feel like they want to like be proud of what they're making. So just like the end product even is like a little bit more motivating for them to actually like see what their peers are doing, and then like want to do the same thing, if you keep doing it throughout time. I feel like that sometimes has a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, and exactly. I love that our projects can be used as an incentive to some of those students. The first year I had some students that just absolutely didn't want to do anything in my class, and I really struggled to find, their niche, find what would motivate them. And when it came time, there's usually 2 or 3 times per semester where I send projects home. When it came time to that, everybody had, their awesome projects they created. Well, those few students that didn't want to do anything didn't have anything to take home, and they were pretty bummed about it. And I used that as a technique to say, well, now you should start creating stuff. Then you'll have something cool to take home and show your parents and your other friends and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool when you can use, the actual project as an incentive in class. Going back to what he said about just because something has been learned doesn't mean that it will result in a change in behavior. Mm-hmm. At first, I didn't really get that statement, but then I read through a couple examples, and then I think I kind of grasped what he was saying there. Mm-hmm. He was saying, for example, if you taught a kid how to ride a bike by showing them, you wouldn't know that anything has been learned until that kid showed you that they can ride a bike after watching you do it. There's other instances where that's not necessarily true, he says. And after reading through some examples, I found an example in my own experience. I use how-to videos all the time for my own personal use. If something breaks on my car and I've never replaced it or fixed it before, I don't know how to, but I'll hop on YouTube. I'll watch somebody else explain and watch them do it. And just by observing that, then I know how to do it most of the time, not every time, but just by watching someone else do that, then I'm able to complete that task on my own. I've replaced a radiator on my truck before, alternator, just about everything. And I have no experience in that field at all, but just by observing someone else do it, it taught me how to do that. So that's definitely
I feel like
example.
we're lucky because it's very like our as art teachers, everything's very visual. So we kind of just like naturally do that with everything. I feel like just like kids watching us do stuff and then they do it. But like I think sometimes we just have to also think about having the kids do it and then teach the kids to teach the kids, you know. And I don't do a whole lot of that myself, but I think in the future, like I might think about like, hey, maybe I could have like an art club after school, and then those kids could go into the classroom and then teach kids who are like a little bit like less artistic, like how to do stuff. And then it could be like all about them teaching the kids what they want to do, and it might be more motivating than having me teach another thing, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's cool.
yeah, it's just something that I haven't done much of myself, but it might be something I think about in the future, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I didn't think about a after school art club.
Yeah, I don't think we have like a chess club in our school, but we don't have like an art club. I know some people do it, but I have never done it before.
Huh. Yeah, and that could be used for multiple things. That could be used as incentives. It could be used, yeah, like you said, they could go in and teach parts of lessons to those students that are less artistic. Going through my report, there was a section in the report where we were supposed to describe how we use strategies from the learning theory that we chose in our lessons. And like I said before, I had already been doing this without knowing. And going forward, I think I'm going to use it even more. When I teach a lesson, I build my lesson plan into a interactive presentation that includes everything, the keywords, the content, the standards, everything. And I use tons and tons of examples and videos. And then after that, once it comes to the creating process part of it, I usually like to break down each part of the project into a step-by-step demonstration. So if we're doing, a found object sculpture, for example, I'll show them all the supplies they have. I'll tell them how they can use it. I'll give them options on how they can use it, what they can use to build, how they can build, their color palettes. I run through the whole project basically real quick and demonstrate how they could complete their project. I give them multiple options on making it their own. But by doing that, most of my students, once it comes to the creative time, I don't have to do much at all. They go, they know what to do. They get excited. They're with their friends, feeding off of each other, ideas. And by doing that, I find that I have more time to dedicate to one-on-one demonstrations for those students that may need a little more attention and may need further instruction. So that gives me that opportunity. And it's worked out very well so far. So
Yeah, and like I feel like as a teacher, we have to have like kind of like really clear instructions at the beginning and like, you know, make sure that kind of everybody knows. But then like if we do have kids that don't pay attention very well, there's kids that do know what we're doing, and then they can help the other kids. And just like trying to get kids to like help each other out is kind of like, I think it's a good thing. And there's even kids that want to work in pairs sometimes for me, like they want to work on the same project together, and I feel like that's fine too. I'm like, you know, as long as you're working and
Mhm.
doing something, I think two people can work together. Sometimes I let that happen, so you know.
Yeah, I do too. And when that happens, I usually say, okay, you can work together, but you each have to create your own project. You can work on them together. If they don't want to do that, then I say, okay, once you guys are done with your collaborative project, who's going to take it home? And then that kind of gets them to thinking, okay, maybe we should make our own. Or sometimes they agree that one person will take it home or the other, and it just works out. But yeah, if they want to work together and they're working great together, yeah, absolutely. I usually let them. And we got one last part. Is there anything else you want to add?
um well, I think like I was kind of wondering about like, you know, like we're talking about like modeling and kids learning through observing. And I was just wondering if like modeling by the means of like other media works too. Cause like I think, you know, we do our own demonstrations, but then sometimes we show like YouTube videos, and like sometimes like movies, TV shows, and video games kind of like influence the kids a lot. So sometimes we'll show things to influence what we're doing. So I don't know if that counts as like modeling for this theory or not. There was something that I was kind of questioning, like, does that count, or is it just kind of like peer to peer? So it was just thinking something I was thinking about, because like I use that kind of stuff like media in my instruction all the time. So what do you think? Do you think it's like part of it, part of the theory?
Yeah, I think it does. Because it's them observing someone else complete an action or a behavior, and then they're mimicking it. They learn from observing that. So I think it does.
And we had to use a lot of that this year with the pandemic, because like I taught from home, so like it was a big part of my instruction. You know, of course I would talk to them through Zooms, and like I would do a demonstration, but then I'd always also bring other media into it a lot of the times to get them motivated. So with like teaching from home, that was a kind of a big thing for me, that I was just like thinking it was part of the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. And going back to the weaving, I taught them myself and demonstrated it, but I also used a video that thoroughly explained it. And I created it along with the video while they're watching both of us create it. So yeah, I used other media too, and I think it fits into this theory as well.
Yeah.
So um, last part, share and discuss any challenges or questions you have about this theory or the instructional assessment practices it promotes. This
I
is
guess,
where, go ahead.
well, I said I guess that last question could have pertained to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. As far as questions, before we started recording, we were saying we don't really have any questions, but you just had one and I just thought of one. As I was writing my report, I did have a little bit of problems with the assessment part. How does teaching strategies based off of this theory affect assessments? And I use different kinds of assessments. I use kind of, I guess you would call them mini assessments for each lesson. So we would orally give assessments before the lesson just to kind of see who knows what, who doesn't know what needs to be covered. And then after the lesson, they usually have a quick worksheet that I use as a mini assessment to show that they've learned what they needed to learn for that lesson. As far as the larger assessments and tying it into this theory, it was a little tough, but I don't know that I'll keep it this way, but I've been designing my year around the elements of art, which I think some other teachers do too. I've heard them say. And each element I break into a unit with 1 or 2 lessons and projects in each. And within each element, I have a small assessment. But then at the end of the semester and at the end of the year, they have a final project that encompasses all the elements that they've learned. It's usually a found object sculpture or something that uses all the elements that we've covered. So using that, I'm able to basically compare their projects to each other as an assessment. If I take their shape, the project that they created while we were studying shape, and compare it to their final project after we fully covered shape, I can kind of use that as an assessment and record the data of their learning growth. That's just kind of the area where I had some questions. How can I better tie in the strategies of this theory to my assessments? And that might be something I just have to think about and research more, because a lot of assessments are written and all that boring stuff.
I think, let me think here. Just like,
I could maybe create some way where they individually can demonstrate something to the class, so it's still modeling.
I mean, I feel like as long as the student is actually doing the project, I feel like this is just saying, like, this whole theory is just saying, like, how are they going to retain the skill? And it's that they observe it. So they might not be observing it from the teacher, they might be observing it from a student, but then they're still retaining the skill, right? So I feel like as long as they are showing somehow that they retain the skill, whatever way it may be, but this is kind of saying it's like through observation, right? So I guess it would probably be assessed the same way, as long as it, like, the results came out in like some kind of positive outcome, like, probably they made the art piece, right? So I don't know, that's all I can think of, is that
No.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, they create a project that's kind of pre-assessment earlier in the semester, and then after further covering each element, the final project is the post-assessment. So they're demonstrating what they've observed and learned. So I guess that ties in. I just don't know if it's enough to tie in. I don't know. I'll have to read some more on that and think about that. Well, it looks like we got about 1 more minute left.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I was just gonna say, like, as a teacher, with students just observing in general, just like being like a positive role model, like everything, the way that you talk to the kids, being positive, like having a like a clean room, being organized, like all that kind of stuff's kind of also important, because we have, like, all the kids are constantly always observing. So just like, trying to be that like positive role model for the kids. I think that's also kind of important, just like as like a just the end cap of all of this, you know.
Yeah. And I don't know if I mentioned in our last discussion, when we were in the middle of summer school over the past few weeks, we had this one student from another school, because we had our school and another school's students. And this student, later on we found out he's a part of a big foster home, and we have another kid that's in the same foster home at our school.
Mm-hmm.
But this kid couldn't read. He couldn't count past 11, and he's in second grade. And it was just heartbreaking, but we were able to focus in on this student. We were able to help him count to 20 by the end of it. But the main thing I feel that influenced him was he had these old flip-flops that he was wearing, and one of them, the bottom, was just a hanging flap. So he's constantly tripping over it. And one day I came to school and I brought some shoe goo with me. I took his shoe, glued it, and left it under some books while we were learning the lesson, and gave it back to him. And some of the other students are like, well, why'd you do that? I said, well, it needed fixed, you know. You need to help people out if you can, and maybe they can't afford another $1 pair of sandals for some reason, but if it's something you can do to help someone out, do it. And that really kind of impacted them, and he was kind of clinging on to me the rest of the summer. So I made a buddy. And
That's cute.
I think the other students were affected by that as well. So hopefully that affects them in a positive way, and they take that with them.
Are you done summer school yet?
Yeah, we finished up. It was about 2 weeks ago we finished up. I'm glad, because this course has a lot this summer.
Yeah.
So, okay, I guess we'll wrap up and stop recording.